Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm so thankful that you are watching or listening to this devotion. Today we are in chapter 7 of John's Gospel. In this chapter, there are a lot of divided opinions, thoughts about Jesus and who he was. And you see this several times in this chapter. For instance, in verse 5, we learned that not even his brothers were believing in him. In verse 12, we learned that there is much grumbling among the crowds concerning him, concerning Jesus. Some were saying he's a good man. Others were saying, no, on the contrary, he leads the people astray. He's a false teacher, false prophet, if you will. In verse 20, the crowd answered, you have a demon. Who would kill you? Jesus said, some are seeking to kill me. And they said, no, nobody's doing that. Yes, they were. Dropping on down in verse 31, many of the crowd believed in him, and they were saying, when the Christ comes, he will not perform more signs than those which this man has, will he? In other words, they were saying, listen, he's the Messiah, he's the Christ. There's never going to be anybody that does more miracles than he does. In verse 32, the Pharisees heard the crowd muttering these things about Jesus, and the chief priest and the Pharisees sent officers to seize Jesus. They wanted to arrest him and put a stop to him. And over in verse 40, these officers went and they heard Jesus, and they were so impressed by what he said, they left Jesus alone and came back to the Pharisees who had sent them. And in verse 40, we read, let's see. Some of the people, therefore, when they heard these words, were saying, this certainly is the prophet. Others were saying, this is the Christ. Still others were saying, surely the Christ is not going to come from Galilee, is he? Again, just all these divided opinions. And verse 43, so there was a division that occurred in the crowd because of him. And then these guards come back to the Pharisees and said in verse 46, never has a man spoken the way this man speaks. And they said, y'all are crazy. You're not educated. You don't know what you're talking about. That's my paraphrase. So, a lot of divided opinions, a lot of different opinions, some favorable and supportive, others hostile and angry toward Jesus. But that shouldn't be surprising. Notice what Jesus said in chapter 7, verse 7. Jesus said the world cannot hate you, talking to his brothers at that point, but it hates me. Now notice that. Jesus said the world hates me. Why? Because I testify of it that its deeds are evil. Now, Jesus would do a deeper dive into that later in John's Gospel when he's talking to the disciples just before his crucifixion, and he's praying for them. And but he makes it really clear here. The world hates me because I testify of it. Testifying is to give evidence, to point things out, that its deeds are evil. The world hates Jesus because he calls out its sin. Now, Scripture's clear, and I have taught this a lot, that you and I as disciples in our living for Jesus and witnessing for Jesus and speaking about issues are to be kind and loving and compassionate and patient and gentle and winsome. But that does not guarantee that people will agree with us, and it does not guarantee that people will like us. Now, I talk so much about how we stand for truth matters because I'm convinced that many Christians stand for truth in an angry way, and that's a sin in and of itself, that we are to develop the fruit of the Spirit. But even when you stand for truth the right way, there are still going to be people who disagree, who dislike, and even some who hate. And the only way some people will ever like you is if you agree with them, even when you don't. And when you agree with someone just to get along, when you agree with someone just to get their favor, you have sold your soul to the devil. And you have ceased to be who you really are. Just understand, be nice, be kind, be gentle, be winsome, be patient, be loving. But some people will hate you anyway, because when you live the truth, believe the truth, and teach the truth, some people hate the truth, and therefore they will hate you. They did with Jesus, and they will with you and me. And that's just how it is. It's just how it is. And it's our connection to Jesus and our love for Jesus and our belief in Jesus and His Word that causes us, yes, to be kind and gentle, but never, ever change what we believe, because we know Him and He is the truth. And that's the word for today. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at John chapter 8.